71 degrees below zero. At this temperature, your breath turns to ice before it leaves your lips. In the frozen wasteland of Yakutia, Agatha thought she knew the rules of survival. But when she dragged a dying shadow into her cabin, she didn't just break the laws of nature, she invited a miracle and a nightmare. Right to her doorstep, you won't believe what was waiting in the mist. The cold in Yakutia doesn't just bite, it hunts. It seeks out the smallest gap in a parka, the tiniest crack in a window frame, and it presses in with the weight of an ocean. For 72-year-old Agatha Miller, the cold was the only neighbor that never left. She lived on the edge of the village, a cluster of timber houses breathing white plumes of smoke into the gray sky. It was late January, the time of the Great White Silence, when the thermometer plunged to negative 60 degrees Celsius and stayed there. But tonight, the radio chatter from the station in Oymyakon had been frantic. A pressure ridge had collapsed. The temperature was plummeting. Negative 68 degrees Celsius, negative 70 degrees Celsius, and falling. Agatha secured the heavy iron latch on her door. Her cabin was a fortress of felt and timber, smelling of dried herbs and burning pine. She was a woman carved from the landscape itself, hands gnarled like old roots, eyes the color of the pale winter sky. She had lived here alone since her husband, Carl, died in the blizzard of '08. The locals respected her, but they gave her space. They said she spoke to the wind. Around 4 p.m., darkness had already swallowed the world. Agatha was preparing tea when she heard it. It wasn't the wind. The wind screamed. This was a whimper, a high-pitched, desperate mewling, barely audible over the groaning of the log walls. Most would have ignored it. In Yakutia, curiosity killed more than the cat. It killed the strong. To open the door was to let the heat escape, a currency more valuable than gold. But the sound came again, scratching against the wood near the porch. Agatha hesitated, her hand hovering over her rifle. Wolves were desperate this year. She pulled on her fur-lined parka, wrapped a wool scarf 3 times around her face, and grabbed the heavy flashlight. She threw the latch and shoved the door open. The air hit her like a physical blow, instantly freezing the moisture in her nose. The beam of her flashlight cut through the whispering stars, the sound of one's own breath freezing into ice crystals mid-air. There, huddled against the foundation of her house, half buried in a drift, was a lump of matted brown fur. It wasn't a dog. It was too broad, the ears too rounded. Agatha stepped out, the snow crunching like broken glass under her boots. She knelt, her knees protesting. The creature was small, no bigger than a spaniel, a brown bear cub. It was motionless, frost coating its eyelashes, its breathing shallow and jagged. Bears should be sleeping. Deep in the taiga, under meters of snow, they should be dreaming. For a cub to be out here, alone, in the dead of winter, meant a tragedy had occurred. The mother was dead, or the den had collapsed. You poor, stupid thing, Agatha whispered into her scarf. Reason told her to leave it. Nature was cruel, but efficient. Taking it in was madness. A bear was not a pet. It was a calorie-consuming engine of destruction. And if the mother was somehow still alive and looking for it, that was a death sentence. But the cub let out a soft, rattling sigh, and Agatha's heart, hardened by decades of solitude, cracked. She couldn't leave it to the white silence. She scooped the animal up. It was surprisingly heavy, a dead weight of muscle and bone. She staggered back toward the door, her lungs burning from the exertion. As she kicked the door shut and slid the latch, she didn't see the pair of yellow eyes watching her from the tree line, blinking once before vanishing into the ice fog. Agatha laid the cub on the rug near the cast-iron stove. Up close, it was in bad shape. Its paws were cracked and bleeding, its fur matted with ice. It was starving, ribs showing through the thick coat. "We are both fools, little one," she muttered, removing her parka. "I am a fool for taking you, and you are a fool for waking up." She went to the pantry and retrieved a tin of condensed milk and some dried deer meat. She mixed the milk with warm water, testing the temperature on her wrist. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The cub lay like a rug, barely breathing. Agatha sat in her rocking chair, the rifle across her lap, watching. She thought about Ivan, the village headman. If he knew she had a predator in her house, he'd burn the place down. Ivan was a practical man, a man who believed in the old ways. Kill the beast before it kills you. Around midnight, the cub's nose twitched. Then, a leg kicked. Agatha moved off the chair and knelt beside it. She dipped her finger in the milk and rubbed it on the cub's gums. The response was immediate. The cub's tongue, rough as sandpaper, rasped against her skin. It opened its eyes. They were blue, the milky blue of infancy, terrified and wild. Easy, Agatha soothed, her voice low. You are safe. You are warm. She fed it from a bowl, the cub lapping greedily, milk splashing onto the floor. When it was finished, it looked at her, then curled into a ball against the heat of the stove and instantly fell back asleep. Agatha didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the thermometer outside. -71 degrees Celsius. The radio crackled with a warning about aggressive wildlife spotted near the northern ridge. She looked at the cub, then at the window. She had saved a life, but she had a terrible feeling she had just invited a storm inside. By the third day, the cub had a name. Boris. It was a strong name, a survivor's name, and he was living up to it. The warmth and the food, mostly Agatha's stockpile of fish and precious condensed milk, had revived him with terrifying speed. He was no longer a helpless lump. He was a chaos machine. He chewed the legs of the kitchen table. He knocked over a stack of firewood. He tried to climb the curtains, ripping the heavy fabric with claws that were already sharp enough to draw blood. Agatha was exhausted. She was 72, with arthritis in her hips and a heart that sometimes fluttered like a trapped bird. But she found herself laughing for the first time in years. "No, Boris! That is not for eating," she scolded as he tried to gnaw on her boot. He looked up at her, head cocked, and let out a playful woof, but the domestic bliss was fragile. Agatha knew she was hiding a time bomb. The village of Oymyakon was small. Privacy was an illusion. Everyone knew when you flushed your toilet, let alone when you were harboring a wild animal. She kept the curtains drawn. She played the radio loud to mask the sounds of Boris playing. She burned extra sage to cover the musky scent of wild bear. The real danger arrived on Tuesday morning in the form of a knock at the door. Agatha froze. Boris was asleep under the table. She quickly threw a heavy quilt over the table, hiding him from view. "Agatha?" "It's Ivan." Her stomach dropped. Ivan Petrov was the unofficial mayor of their sector, a man with a nose for trouble and a deep-seated hatred for bears. 2 years ago, a brown bear had taken his prize sled dog. He hadn't forgiven the species since. Agatha opened the door a crack. "Ivan. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "It's 60 out there." Ivan stood on the porch, a giant of a man in a wolf fur hat, his face red from the cold. He didn't smile. "We're doing a check, Agatha. The generators are struggling. Just making sure the widows are warm." "I am warm, Ivan." "Thank you." She tried to close the door, but his heavy boot blocked it. "I heard something." "Agatha," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Passing by yesterday. Sounded like digging, scratching, rats." Agatha lied smoothly. "Big ones this year. I'm setting traps." Ivan's eyes narrowed. He sniffed the air. The sage was burning, but beneath it, there was the faint, undeniable tang of wet fur. "Rats don't smell like the taiga." "Agatha." He pushed the door gently but firmly. "Let me come in. I'll check the floorboards for you." "I am fine, Ivan," she snapped, panic rising. Suddenly, from under the table, a sound erupted. It wasn't a growl. It was a sneeze, a loud, wet, unmistakable sneeze, followed by the clattering of claws on wood as Boris woke up and shook himself. Ivan's eyes went wide. He shoved the door fully open, forcing Agatha back. "Ivan, no!" she cried. He strode into the room, his hand going to the knife at his belt. He ripped the quilt off the table. Boris looked up, blinking. a half-eaten dried fish in his paws. He looked at Ivan, then at Agatha, sensing the tension. He let out a low, warning huff. "Mother of God," Ivan whispered, backing away slowly. "Are you insane, woman? That is a killer. He is a baby." Agatha stood between the man and the bear. "He was freezing to death, Ivan. Look at him. He is skin and bone. He is a brown bear, Agatha. Do you know what happens when he gets hungry? When he smells your blood?" Ivan's face was purple with rage. "You are endangering the whole village. If he gets out, he won't get out. I will call the reserve in the spring. They will take him. Spring is 3 months away," Ivan shouted. Boris scrambled back, frightened by the noise, knocking over a chair. Ivan pointed a gloved finger at her. "I cannot let this stand. You are a danger to yourself. I am going to the council. We will come back, Agatha, and we will not be asking nicely. That beast needs to be put down before it eats a child." He turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard snow fell from the roof. Agatha sank into the rocking chair, her hands shaking. She looked at Boris, who crawled out and rested his head on her knee, sensing her distress. "They are coming for you, little one," she whispered, stroking his ears. But Ivan wasn't the only thing coming. Later that night, the wind died down, bringing an eerie silence to the valley. Agatha was boarding up the window, preparing for Ivan's return, when she heard a sound that made her blood turn to ice. It came from outside, from the edge of the forest. It was a roar, not the playful huff of a cub. This was a sound that vibrated in the chest, a sound of ancient, primal fury. It was a mother bear, and she wasn't hibernating, she was hunting. Agatha rushed to the peephole. Under the light of the aurora borealis, which twisted in green ribbons across the sky, she saw a shadow. It was massive, gaunt, starving, and scarred. A mother bear, driven mad by the loss of her cub, had tracked the scent. She wasn't looking for food. She was looking for her baby, and she was standing directly between Agatha's front door and the village path where Ivan and his men would soon be marching. The roar was not a sound. It was a concussion. It rattled the frost off the window panes and sent Boris scrambling under the cast-iron stove. Whimpering in a high, thin pitch, Agatha extinguished her lantern. Darkness was her only shield now. Outside, the northern lights cast a ghostly green pallor over the snow. The mother bear was a terrifying silhouette against the drifts. She was gaunt, her fur hanging in ragged patches, standing on her hind legs to sniff the air. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, a tower of desperate, starving muscle. She dropped to all fours and charged the cabin. Thud, the impact shook the timber frame. Agatha grabbed her rifle, her hands trembling not from cold, but from adrenaline. The beast was testing the perimeter, clawing at the logs. She could hear the wood splintering. This wasn't just aggression. It was a rescue mission. The mother could smell her cub, but then a new sound cut through the wind. The roar of engines. Headlights swept across the trees, blindingly bright against the snow. 3 snowmobiles and an old Soviet truck were tearing up the path from the village. Ivan had returned, and he had brought the council. Agatha watched in horror through the peephole. "No," she whispered. "Go back, you fools." The convoy didn't see the bear. The mother bear had retreated into the shadows of the heavy pine line as the vehicles approached, her white-frothed muzzle blending perfectly with the snowbanks. Ivan jumped off the lead snowmobile. He was holding a heavy shotgun. Beside him were 2 other men, Sergei, the village mechanic, and a younger man named Silas. They looked angry, fueled by vodka and fear. "Agatha," Ivan bellowed, his voice cracking in the frigid air. "Open up. We aren't leaving until that animal is dead." Agatha fumbled with the window latch, shoving it open just an inch. "Ivan, get back in the truck. Run. Don't try to scare us, woman." Ivan marched toward the porch. "You're harboring a predator. By the laws of the settlement, I have the right to." He never finished the sentence. From the darkness to Ivan's left, the snow exploded. It happened with blurring speed. One moment, there was an empty snowbank. The next, the mother bear was there. She didn't roar this time. She struck in silence. She hit the side of the truck first, seemingly confused by the headlights. The metal crumpled like tinfoil. The impact sent the vehicle sliding sideways on the ice. "Bear!" Sergei screamed, scrambling backward and slipping on the ice. "It's the mother! It's the mother!" Chaos erupted. Ivan spun around, raising his shotgun, but his gloved hands were clumsy in the -70°C cold. He fired a shot, but it went wide, blasting bark off a nearby pine. The noise only enraged the beast. The bear turned her attention to Ivan. She swiped, a casual, backhanded blow that caught him in the chest. Ivan flew 10 feet through the air, landing in a snowdrift with a sickening crunch. He didn't move. Silas and Sergei were scrambling for their snowmobiles, engines whining as they tried to turn them around. But the cold was seizing the machines. One stalled. The bear was on them. Inside the cabin, Agatha watched the slaughter unfold. She looked at Boris, who was shivering under the stove. She looked at her rifle. She could stay inside. The bear would likely kill the men, retrieve her cub if she could break the door, or eventually leave. If Agatha opened the door, she would freeze, or be eaten. But she saw Ivan's motionless body in the snow. He was a hard man, a cruel man at times, but he had cleared her driveway after the blizzard last year. He was a father. "Damn it all," Agatha hissed. She didn't grab the gun. She grabbed Boris. She scooped the struggling, heavy cub into her arms. He bit her forearm in panic, his teeth sinking deep, but she ignored the pain. She kicked the door latch open. The cold hit her instantly, freezing the blood on her arm. "Hey!" she screamed into the night. "Hey! Over here!" The mother bear, who was currently tearing the seat off Sergei's snowmobile while the mechanic cowered behind it, froze. She turned her massive head. She saw Agatha, and more importantly, she saw the bundle of fur in Agatha's arms. The bear dropped to all fours and let out a sound that wasn't a roar. It was a low, vibrating chuff. Agatha stepped out onto the porch. She was exposed, no weapon. Just an old woman, offering a sacrifice to the winter gods. "Here!" Agatha yelled, her voice shaking. She struggled to hold the squirming cub up. "He is here. Take him." The mother bear charged. Sergei and Silas watched in paralyzed terror. They expected to see the old woman torn to shreds. The bear covered the distance in seconds, a freight train of fur and claws. Agatha stood her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to run. When the bear was 10 feet away, close enough for Agatha to smell the rot and pine on her breath, Agatha dropped to her knees and released the cub. "Go, Boris," she choked out. "Go to Mama." The cub tumbled into the snow. He squealed, confused for a microsecond, before the scent hit him. He scrambled forward, slipping on the ice, crying out. The mother bear skidded to a halt, snow spraying over Agatha's boots. She was so close, Agatha could feel the heat radiating from her massive body. The bear loomed over the old woman, a shadow of death. She lowered her head, jaws snapping. Agatha closed her eyes and waited for the end. But the bite never came. Instead, she heard a frantic sniffing sound. Wet, snuffling noises. Then, a rough tongue licking fur. Agatha opened one eye. The mother bear was nudging Boris, rolling him over in the snow, checking him for injuries. The cub was whining, burying his face in his mother's thick neck fur. The reunion was frantic, violent in its affection. The mother bear looked up, her eyes, yellow and ancient, locked onto Agatha's. For a heartbeat, time stopped in the frozen wilderness. There was no aggression in that look anymore. There was a terrifying intelligence. The bear knew. She knew the cub smelled of milk and dried meat. She knew the old woman had kept him warm. The bear huffed a sharp, clear exhalation of steam. Then, she turned. She nudged Boris toward the tree line. The cub trotted after her, looking back once at the cabin, before the two of them vanished into the swirling ice fog, swallowed by the white silence. Silence rushed back into the clearing, heavy and absolute. Agatha slumped against the porch railing, her legs giving out. The adrenaline crash was hitting her hard. "Agatha?" The voice was weak. She looked toward the drift. Ivan was trying to sit up, clutching his ribs. Blood stained his parka, but he was alive. Sergei and Silas crawled out from behind the broken snowmobiles, their faces pale, staring at Agatha as if she were a ghost. She didn't kill you, Sergei whispered, walking forward with trembling legs. I saw it. She looked at you and she walked away. Agatha struggled to her feet, clutching her bleeding arm where Boris had bitten her. She didn't want us, Sergei. She just wanted her boy. Every mother is the same. They loaded Ivan onto the remaining functional snowmobile. His ribs were broken, and he had a concussion. But the thick layers of fur had saved him from the claws. Before they left, Ivan looked at Agatha. He looked at the blood on the snow, then at the empty woods, and finally at the old woman standing defiant in the cold. The arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, bewildered respect. You saved us, Ivan rasped. You crazy old witch. You saved us all. Get off my property, Ivan, Agatha said softly, though there was no malice in it. And fix my door when you come back. Ivan nodded. I will. And Agatha, no one touches you. From now on, no one touches you. The journey back to solitude was quick. The engines faded into the distance. Agatha went inside. The cabin was freezing. The door had been open too long. She shoved the latch closed and stoked the fire until the iron stove glowed cherry red. She wrapped her arm in a bandage and sat in her rocking chair. The cabin felt empty. The scratching sounds were gone. The playful growls were gone. Agatha looked at the condensed milk stain on the floor. A tear, hot and foreign, tracked down her cheek. She was alone again. But as she looked out the window at the thermometer, reading -72 degrees Celsius now, she didn't feel the crushing weight of the loneliness. She felt connected. She had stared into the eyes of the wild and lived. The next morning, when she opened her door, she found something on the porch. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a weapon. Lying on the welcome mat was a fresh, whole salmon. It was frozen solid, silver scales glinting in the weak sun. There were no footprints. The wind had scrubbed the snow clean. Agatha picked up the fish. It was heavy. A gift. She looked toward the forest, raised the fish in a silent toast, and smiled. In the coldest place on earth, the warmth of a miracle would last her the rest of her days. This story isn't just about survival. It's about the universal language of compassion. Agatha proved that even in the most hostile environment on earth, at -71 degrees Celsius, an act of kindness can bridge the gap between man and beast. She didn't conquer nature. She respected it, and in return, nature spared her. It's a reminder that sometimes, the strongest weapon we have isn't a gun, it's a heart willing to care. If Agatha's bravery gave you chills, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Would you have opened the door for the cub? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story from the edge of the world. Stay warm, and see you in the next video.